I'm Clorinda, 34, and I always believed that trust was the cornerstone of any marriage. That was until I found those text messages on my husband's phone. James and I had been married for 8 years, and our mountain cabin was our special retreat, our sanctuary from the world. Never did I imagine that the place holding our most precious memories would become the stage for the most devastating betrayal. When I discovered my husband was having an affair with my close friend Sarah, something inside me broke, but something stronger emerged. If you want to know what happened, when I drove all night to get to our cabin first, with her husband Michael beside me, like this video, subscribe to my channel and let me know where you're watching from. Trust me, what happened next changed all our lives forever. I met James at a marketing conference in downtown Seattle 10 years ago. I was presenting on digital strategy while he was there representing his architecture firm. Our eyes connected across the crowded room during my presentation, and he approached me afterward with intelligent questions that showed he'd actually been listening, not just pretending to listen while waiting for his turn to speak, which was refreshingly different from most men I'd dated. "Your insights on consumer behavior patterns were fascinating," he said, his blue eyes twinkling with genuine interest. "Would you mind continuing this discussion over coffee?" That coffee turned into dinner, which turned into a weekend hike up Mount Rainier, which eventually turned into the love story I thought would last forever. James was everything I wanted in a partner: intelligent, ambitious, outdoorsy, and attentive. We shared a love for the mountains, for adventure, for building a life that balanced hard work with play. Within a year, we were inseparable. We moved in together after 18 months, and he proposed on our second anniversary during a sunset hike. "I want to watch 1,000 more sunsets with you," he said, getting down on one knee with the mountains silhouetted behind him. How could I say anything but yes? We were married in a beautiful ceremony at Alpine Lodge, a stunning mountain retreat that would later inspire our cabin purchase. The wedding was intimate, just 60 of our closest friends and family. Sarah was one of my bridesmaids, though we weren't as close then as we would later become. She came with her husband Michael, who hit it off immediately with James. They bonded over craft beers and discussions about rock climbing routes, while Sarah and I talked about my new marketing firm that I had recently launched. The first 5 years of our marriage were everything I had dreamed of. We worked hard in the city during the week, both advancing in our careers. James became a partner in his architecture firm, while my marketing business grew to 15 employees. On weekends, we explored the Pacific Northwest, hiking new trails, discovering hidden waterfalls, and mapping out our future together. On our 5th anniversary, James surprised me with a folder containing property listings. "What's this?" I asked, flipping through pages of cabins nestled in forests. "I thought it was time we had our own mountain retreat," he replied, his arm around my shoulders. "Somewhere we can escape to whenever we want. Our own piece of the wilderness." We spent the next 3 months hunting for the perfect place and finally found it. A 2-bedroom log cabin with a wraparound porch situated on 5 acres of forested land near Mount Baker. It had a stone fireplace, exposed beam ceilings, and windows that framed the mountain views perfectly. The moment we walked in, we knew it was ours. We bought it as a joint anniversary gift to each other, pooling money we had been saving for years. The cabin quickly became our sanctuary. We spent nearly every weekend there, gradually furnishing it with carefully selected pieces that reflected both our styles. James built a fire pit outside where we would sit under the stars, wrapped in blankets, planning our future. We talked about maybe having children in a year or two, once my business was more established. It was during this time that our friendship with Sarah and Michael deepened. They had also purchased property in the area about 30 minutes from our cabin. We started doing couple retreats together, hiking during the day and sharing meals and wine by the fire at night. Sarah and I became close, going on spa days together and having long talks about life, marriage, and our dreams. Sarah worked as a physical therapist, and had a gentle, nurturing way about her. She was striking with auburn hair and green eyes that crinkled when she laughed. Michael was more reserved than James, thoughtful and analytical in his role as an environmental scientist. The four of us balanced each other perfectly, or so I thought. We entertained other friends at the cabin too, hosted summer barbecues and winter fondue nights. But Sarah and Michael were our constants, our closest friends. The people we vacationed with, celebrated holidays with, shared our deepest thoughts with. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things began to change, though I didn't recognize it at the time. About 8 months ago, James started working later at the office. Architecture projects with tight deadlines, he explained. He started guarding his phone, turning it face down when I entered a room. The password changed from my birthday to something I didn't know, but I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner, my best friend. "You're working so much these days," I commented one night as he crawled into bed at midnight. "This Japanese client is demanding," he murmured his back to me. "Just a few more weeks, and things will calm down." I believed him because that's what you do when you love someone. You believe them. You trust them. Even when the signs begin to appear, you find ways to explain them away, because the alternative, the truth, is too painful to consider. The first real sign something was wrong came on a rainy Tuesday in March. James was in the shower and his phone kept buzzing on the nightstand. Normally, I would never check his messages, but it buzzed 5 times in 2 minutes. Thinking it might be an emergency, I glanced at the screen. The text preview showed a message from S-Client that read, "Miss you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Wear that blue shirt I love." Something cold settled in my stomach. What client signs texts with "miss you" and comments on his clothing choices? I put the phone down quickly when I heard the shower turn off, my heart racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask. That night, I lay awake, watching James sleep, studying the face I thought I knew better than my own. Was there something different about him? Had I missed something I tried to recall when things had started to change between us? Over the next few weeks, I noticed how James had become more critical of me. Small things that never bothered him before suddenly became issues. "Do you really need to laugh so loudly?" he asked during dinner with friends. "That dress doesn't really flatter you," he commented before a work function. The man who once told me I was beautiful first thing every morning now barely looked at me when I spoke. Our date nights, once sacred weekly events, were regularly cancelled for work emergencies. When we did spend time together, James was distracted, checking his phone constantly. I responded the way many women do when their marriages start to falter. I blamed myself. I tried harder. I booked us couples massages, planned special dinners, bought new lingerie. I suggested weekend trips to our cabin, hoping to reconnect in the place that had always been our refuge. "I can't this weekend" became his standard response. "Maybe next month when this project wraps up." Around the same time, Sarah became increasingly unavailable. Our weekly coffee dates were cancelled. Our texts went from daily conversations to brief, delayed responses. When I suggested a girls' weekend, she claimed her schedule was packed with work and family obligations. Then came the dinner party that opened my eyes. We were hosting at our Seattle home with 3 other couples, including Sarah and Michael. Throughout the evening, I noticed strange moments between James and Sarah, the way they seemed to avoid looking directly at each other, how they tensed when accidentally reaching for the same serving dish, the brief, loaded glance they shared when someone mentioned secrets. After dinner, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Michael as he helped me load the dishwasher. "Everything okay with you and Sarah?" I asked casually, noticing how tired he looked. Michael sighed, setting down the glass he was rinsing. "I don't know, Clorinda. Something's off. She's distant, working late, always on her phone." He gave a bitter laugh. "Probably just my imagination. 15 years of marriage, and now I'm getting paranoid. I placed a comforting hand on his arm. I'm sure it's nothing. We all go through phases, but even as I reassured him, something twisted inside me. His description of Sarah mirrored my own concerns about James. In the following weeks, Michael and I began texting, occasionally checking in on each other, just friendly support between two people who'd known each other for years. Neither of us mentioned our growing suspicions directly, but there was comfort in connecting with someone who seemed to understand the subtle anxiety I was feeling. The definitive moment came when I was doing laundry and found a hotel receipt in James's jacket pocket. The Fairmont Olympic, downtown Seattle, from a Tuesday when he'd told me he was at a client dinner, a single-night room service for two, a bottle of champagne. My hands shook as I stared at the piece of paper, unable to deny the implications any longer. That night, I sat across from James at dinner, the receipt burning a hole in my pocket. I watched him eat, check his phone, make small talk about his day, all while living what was clearly a double life. Who was this stranger I had married, and how had I been so blind? The next morning, after James left for work, I did something I never thought I would do. I logged into our phone account and checked his call and text history. There were hundreds of messages exchanged with a number I recognized as Sarah's. Multiple calls, some lasting over an hour, often late at night or during his supposed client meetings. My hands shaking, I accessed our shared computer. James had forgotten to log out of his email account. It didn't take long to find them hidden in a folder labeled Project Archives. Dozens of exchanges between him and Sarah dating back nearly 6 months. Can't stop thinking about yesterday. One email from Sarah read, "The way you touch me makes me forget everything else," James had replied. There were arrangements for meetings at hotels at her office after hours, even at our home when I was travelling for work. There were references to gifts he had bought her, restaurants they had visited together, inside jokes I wasn't part of. Each word was like a knife. I printed the most damning emails, my vision blurred with tears. Then I found the credit card statements showing purchases I'd never seen. A silver bracelet from Tiffany's, a cashmere sweater, dinners at restaurants we used to consider our places. That evening, I confronted James with the hotel receipt, just that single piece of evidence, wanting to give him a chance to come clean on his own. "What's this?" I asked, sliding the paper across the kitchen counter. James glanced at it, his face briefly registering shock before settling into a careful, neutral expression. "A business expense. We had clients in town. At 8 p.m, with room service for two and champagne and no business charge, just our personal card." His eyes hardened. "Are you spying on me now? Going through my pockets?" "I was doing laundry, James. Answer the question. This is ridiculous. You're becoming paranoid, Clorinda. I don't have to account for every minute of my day to you." His voice rose, shifting from defensive to aggressive with stunning speed. "Who were you with at the hotel?" I pressed, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Colleagues? Clients? Does it matter? The fact that you're interrogating me like this shows how little you trust me. Maybe that's our real problem." He stormed out of the kitchen, turning the accusation back on me with practiced skill. I sat at the counter, stunned by how easily he had lied, how quickly he had made me the villain in the story. Was I going crazy? Was I really the jealous, paranoid wife he was painting me as? That night, I called my sister Lauren and broke down, telling her everything. "This is classic gaslighting," she said firmly. "He's trying to make you doubt yourself so you won't pursue the truth. Trust your instincts, Clara. You're one of the most level-headed people I know." "But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm destroying my marriage over nothing?" "Then get more evidence," she advised. "But don't confront him again until you're absolutely sure. Men like this are good at lying. You need to be strategic." Following her advice, I hired a private investigator the next day. It felt surreal, something out of a movie rather than my actual life. The PI was a retired police officer named Diane, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "Unfortunately, this is very common," she told me when I explained the situation. "I'll need a week or two. Try to act normal in the meantime. Those 2 weeks were the hardest of my life, pretending everything was fine while my world was collapsing, making dinner for a man I no longer recognized, sleeping beside him while wondering where and who he had been with earlier that day. When Diane called me to her office, she had a folder waiting. "I'm sorry," she said, simply sliding it across her desk. Inside were dozens of photos. James and Sarah entering hotels together, holding hands in a park on the other side of the city, kissing in his car in the parking garage of her office building. The timestamp on one photo showed them at a restaurant downtown on a night he'd told me he was working late. Another showed them entering our cabin, his hand on the small of her back, on a weekend he'd claimed to be at a conference in Portland. Our cabin. They had taken their affair to our special place, the sanctuary we had created together. I sat in my car in the PI's parking lot for an hour after our meeting, the folder of photos on the passenger seat, unable to drive, unable to think clearly through the pain. Part of me wanted to call Sarah immediately, to scream at her, to demand to know how she could betray me this way. Another part wanted to wait at home, for James to throw his belongings onto the front lawn to change the locks. But a small, clear voice inside urged caution. This needed to be handled carefully, strategically, in a way that would leave no room for more lies or manipulation. 3 days after receiving the photos, I overheard a phone conversation that would change everything. I had come home early from work with a migraine and was lying down in our bedroom when I heard James on the back porch, his voice low and intimate in a way it hadn't been with me in months. "I've arranged everything," he was saying. "Told Clorinda I have a business trip to Chicago this weekend. We'll have the cabin all to ourselves from Friday through Sunday. Just you and me, baby. No interruptions." There was a pause as he listened to the person on the other end. Sarah I knew without a doubt. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," he continued with a confidence that made my blood boil. "She's completely clueless, believes whatever I tell her." Another pause. "I know I can't wait either." 3 whole days in our special place. Our special place. The cabin that we had lovingly chosen together, the place where we had talked about starting a family someday, and now he was planning to defile it with his mistress, my friend. The ultimate betrayal from both of them. When James came inside, I pretended to be asleep. That night at dinner, he casually mentioned his upcoming business trip to Chicago, explaining how a client needed him to review plans for a new development. "That's too bad," I said, amazed at how normal my voice sounded. "I was hoping we might go to the cabin this weekend. It's been ages." "I know, babe. I'm disappointed too," he lied smoothly. "Maybe next weekend." I nodded, picking at my food while rage and pain battled within me. How many times had he lied to my face like this? How long had I been the fool in this story? After dinner, I went into our home office, closed the door, and called Michael. We had been texting regularly, supporting each other through what we both sensed were troubled marriages, though neither of us had voiced our darkest suspicions. "Michael, are you free to meet for coffee tomorrow?" I asked when he answered. "Of course," he said. "Everything okay? You sound strange." "No," I replied honestly. "Nothing is okay, but I can't talk about it over the phone. Please just meet me at Ravenna Park by the Big Oak." 4 p.m. The next day, I arrived at the park with my folder of evidence. Michael was already waiting, his face concerned as I approached. We sat on a bench, and I took a deep breath, knowing I was about to shatter his world, just as mine had been shattered. "I don't know how to say this gently," I began. "So I'll just say it. James and Sarah are having an affair. It's been going on for at least 6 months. Michael stared at me, his expression frozen between disbelief and dawning comprehension. "What? No, that's not—" Sarah wouldn't. Silently, I opened the folder and showed him the photos. His hands shook as he looked through them, his face draining of colour. When he reached the pictures of them entering our cabin together, he stopped. "Your cabin," he said hollowly. "They went to your cabin." multiple times according to the date stamps. I pointed to different photos showing different visits. Michael stood abruptly and walked a few paces away, his back to me. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists, then released, then clenched again. When he finally turned back to me, his eyes were red but dry. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I told him about the conversation I'd overheard. James's plan to take Sarah to the cabin that very weekend. "I've been thinking about it non-stop," I explained. "Part of me wants to just file for divorce and be done with it, but another part of me wants them to know that they didn't get away with it," Michael finished for me, "that they didn't fool us completely." "Exactly." I looked down at my hands. "Is that petty, wanting them to face us, to have to look us in the eyes?" Michael sat back down beside me. "No. It's human, and I think we deserve that much at least, to not be the only ones carrying this pain." Over the next 2 hours, as the sun set over the park, we formulated our plan. James had told me he was leaving for Chicago early Friday morning. Sarah had told Michael she was having a girls' weekend with her sister. They were both planning to drive separately to the cabin on Friday afternoon. "What if we get there first?" I suggested, the idea forming as I spoke. "What if we're waiting for them when they arrive?" Michael's eyes lit with a fierce determination. "I like it. Show them they're not as clever as they think." We worked out the details methodically. We would drive up early Friday morning. We had time to prepare the confrontation to be composed when they arrived. No screaming, no violence, just the devastating power of truth laid bare. "I'll pick you up at 5 a.m., Michael said as we parted. "Pack whatever evidence you want to bring." As he turned to leave, I caught his arm. "Are you okay?" Michael's smile was sad but resolute. "No, but I will be. We both will be. They don't get to destroy us." Friday morning arrived with a grey drizzle that matched my mood. I had barely slept rehearsing what I would say, imagining their faces when they found us waiting. James had left at 6 the previous evening, claiming he needed to catch an early flight. I had kissed him goodbye, played the role of loving wife one last time, and then spent the night alternating between tears and cold, clarifying anger. Michael pulled up in his Subaru precisely at 5. He looked as exhausted as I felt, with dark circles under his eyes, but there was a steadiness to him that I found reassuring. We didn't speak much as we loaded my bags into his car. What was there to say? We were two people bound together by the worst kind of betrayal, heading toward a confrontation that would change all our lives. As we drove north toward the mountains, the rain intensified, sheets of water sluicing across the windshield. It felt appropriate, this cleansing deluge, as if nature itself was acknowledging the storm we were about to unleash. "Did you sleep?" Michael asked, after we had been driving for an hour. "Not really," I admitted. "An hour maybe." He adjusted his grip on the steering wheel. "I keep thinking about what I'm going to say to her, to them, but nothing seems adequate." I nodded, understanding completely. "I've been doing the same thing, planning this perfect speech that will make James realize exactly what he's throwing away. But then I think, does it even matter? Will anything I say change who he's revealed himself to be?" "That's the hardest part," Michael said quietly. "Realizing that the person you've loved for years isn't who you thought they were, that maybe they never were." The truth of his words settled over me. We lapsed into silence again, each lost in our own thoughts, as the miles passed, and the landscape changed from urban to rural to wilderness. Rain gave way to fog. As we climbed in elevation, the world outside the car becoming ghostly and indistinct. "Can I ask you something?" I said as we turned onto the Forest Service road that led to our cabin. "When did you first suspect about Sarah?" Michael was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. "There wasn't one big moment," he finally said, "just 100 small ones. The way she stopped sharing details about her day, how she started taking calls in another room, the new clothes, the late nights, the decreased interest in our future plans." He glanced at me briefly. "Similar things," I replied, "plus finding that hotel receipt, and then hiring the investigator who confirmed everything." We fell silent again as the cabin came into view through the trees. My heart contracted painfully at the sight of it. So many happy memories now tainted. Would I ever be able to look at it again without thinking of this betrayal Michael parked behind the cabin where our cars wouldn't be visible from the main approach? We unloaded quickly, and I unlocked the door, hit immediately by the familiar scent of pine and cedar that had once represented such happiness. "So this is it," Michael said, looking around at the open living area with its stone fireplace and exposed beams. "This is it," I echoed. "Our dream place." We set our bags down and stood awkwardly for a moment, the reality of what we were about to do sinking in more deeply now that we were actually here. "I should check the bedroom," I said, dreading what I might find, but needing to know. "Make sure they didn't leave anything last time they were here." Michael nodded. "I'll get a fire going. It's cold in here." I walked down the short hallway to the master bedroom, steeling myself. The bed was made neatly, just as I had left it the last time we visited, but as I moved closer, I noticed something on the nightstand, a small bottle of perfume that wasn't mine, Sarah's signature scent, the one I had complimented her on countless times. With shaking hands, I picked it up. She had been confident enough, comfortable enough in my space to leave her things here. Had James told her I would never find out? Had they laughed about how oblivious I was? As I turned to leave, something caught my eye on the floor near the dresser, an earring. I bent to pick it up, recognizing it immediately as part of a pair I had admired when Sarah wore them to a dinner party months ago. Gold, with a small emerald that matched her eyes. I returned to the living room clutching these items, these physical proofs of their betrayal in my home. Michael looked up from where he was arranging logs in the fireplace, his expression darkening as he saw what I held. "Found these," I said, setting them on the coffee table. "They've been here enough times that she's leaving things behind." Michael picked up the earring, turning it over in his palm. "I gave her these for our 10th anniversary, he said softly. "She told me she lost one." The casual cruelty of it, the layers of lies they had both constructed, hit us anew. We spent the next few hours preparing the cabin for the confrontation to come. I printed out additional emails and text messages I had discovered, arranging them on the dining table alongside the photos from the investigator. Michael found a bottle of whiskey in the cabinet and poured us each a small glass, though neither of us drank much. We needed to be clear-headed. As evening approached, we positioned ourselves in the living room lights, low, waiting. According to their messages, they would be arriving separately, but around the same time, 6:30 or 7. We sat in silence, watching the clock, listening for cars on the gravel drive. "What if we're wrong?" Michael asked suddenly. "What if there's some explanation we haven't thought of?" I looked at him, at the hope that still flickered in his eyes despite everything. "Do you really believe that's possible after everything we've seen?" He sighed, shaking his head. "No, but part of me still wants to believe in the woman I married, the woman I thought she was." I reached across and squeezed his hand briefly. "I understand, but we need to be prepared for who they've actually shown themselves to be, not who we thought they were." At 6:45, we heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Michael and I exchanged a glance, drawing strength from each other's presence as we prepared for the moment of truth. Through the window, we saw headlights approaching, then the outline of a car parking, James's Audi. "He's here," I whispered unnecessarily. "She must be coming separately to maintain the fiction of where they're supposed to be." We watched from the window as James got out of his car, whistling as he retrieved his overnight bag from the trunk. So casual, so untroubled by his deception. My stomach twisted with a mixture of grief and anger as I watched my husband approach the cabin he had helped choose, where we had built so many memories, now coming to defile it with his mistress. "Are you ready?" Michael asked, his voice steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. I nodded, moving to sit on the sofa, angled to face the door. Michael took a position in the armchair adjacent to me. We had decided to leave most lights off, just the fire casting a warm glow, creating dramatic shadows, a setting for the drama about to unfold. The key turned in the lock. The door swung open. James stepped inside, still whistling, and reached for the light switch. "Welcome home," I said calmly before he could turn on the lights. James froze his hand still on the wall switch. Clorinda, why are you sitting in the dark? I'm not alone, I replied, my voice steadier than I had expected it to be. As if on cue, headlights swept across the windows as a second car pulled up. Sarah. James's eyes widened as he registered Michael's presence. What's going on? Why is Michael here? I think you know exactly what's going on, Michael said, his voice hard. And I think you know exactly why I'm here. The colour drained from James's face as understanding dawned. Outside, a car door slammed. Footsteps approached. A voice called out, James, why is there another car here? And then Sarah was in the doorway, her smile of anticipation freezing as she took in the tableau before her, her lover standing paralysed just inside the door, her husband and her best friend sitting calmly in the shadowy room, waiting. Oh my God, she whispered, one hand flying to her throat. For a moment, the four of us remained frozen in a tableau of betrayal and discovery. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and Sarah's ragged breathing as she stared at Michael and me in horror. James recovered first, his shock quickly giving way to defensive anger. What the hell is this? Some kind of ambush? Is that really the approach you want to take? I asked, my voice calm despite the thundering of my heart. Aggression after what we've found out. Sarah took a hesitant step into the cabin, her eyes darting between all of us. Michael, what are you doing here? What, Sarah? Michael's voice was controlled, but I could hear the tremor of rage beneath. How did I discover that my wife is sleeping with my friend's husband? How did I find out that the business trips and girls' weekends were all lies? Is that what you're asking? It's not what you think. James attempted, taking a step toward me. Clorinda, this is all a misunderstanding. Sarah and I had some work to discuss and thought the cabin would be a quiet place to focus. I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. Work at 7 p.m. on a Friday. In our vacation home when you told me you were in Chicago and she told Michael she was with her sister. I stood moving to the dining table where we had arranged our evidence. Please explain what kind of work involves hotel rooms downtown. Explain what kind of professional collaboration requires you to buy her jewellery from Tiffany's. James blanched, his confident facade crumbling as I gestured to the array of photographs, receipts, and printed emails spread across the table. He and Sarah exchanged a panicked glance that confirmed everything beyond any lingering doubt. How did you get these? Sarah whispered, staring at a photo of them kissing in James's car. Does it matter? Michael asked, rising to stand beside me, a united front against their betrayal. What matters is that we know everything, how long it's been going on, where you've met, what you've said to each other. We deserve better than this, I added quietly. Better than lies. Better than betrayal by the people who promised to love us. Sarah's composure broke first. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she sank onto a chair near the door. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. It just happened. We didn't plan it. We didn't want to hurt anyone. It just happened, Michael repeated incredulously. For 6 months in hotel rooms you booked in advance. In this cabin you drove hours to reach together. That's not something that just happens. Sarah, those are choices. Deliberate choices you both made every single day. James had gone from defensive to desperate, moving toward me with pleading eyes. Clorinda, please, yes, I made a terrible mistake, but our marriage doesn't have to end over this. We can work through it. Go to counselling, start fresh. I stepped back, keeping distance between us. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something thoughtless. This, I gestured to the evidence again. This is systematic deception. Months of lying to my face. Taking your affair to the place that was supposed to be our sanctuary. It wasn't just physical, Sarah interjected, looking up with tear-stained cheeks. We fell in love. We couldn't help our feelings. The statement hung in the air, landing like a physical blow. Somehow, this admission was worse than the physical betrayal. Not just sex, but love. Not just their bodies, but their hearts. I saw Michael flinch beside me, felt my own pain twist deeper. Then why stay with us at all? Michael asked, his voice hollow. Why not just leave? Why drag us along, make us complicit in our own humiliation? James and Sarah exchanged another glance, this one laden with guilt and uncertainty. It's complicated, James finally said. We weren't sure. We didn't want to hurt you both. Bullshit! I said the word strange and harsh in my mouth. You didn't want to deal with the consequences, the messy divorces, the judgment from friends and family, the financial complications. You wanted the excitement of an affair with the security of your marriages as a backup. Sarah began to cry harder. James said he was going to tell you, she gasped between sobs. He promised me weeks ago that he was going to end things with you. James shot her a look of betrayal. Sarah, don't. We agreed we'd handle this together. Is that true? I demanded, turning to James. Were you planning to leave me? James hesitated, trapped between lies. I was confused, he finally said, torn between my history with you and my feelings for Sarah. So you decided to string us both along while you made up your mind. The realization was another blow. Were we supposed to be grateful when you finally decided which of us you wanted to keep? It wasn't like that, James protested weakly. Then what was it like? Michael asked, his quiet intensity a counterpoint to my growing anger. Explain it to us. Help us understand how you justified lying to our faces day after day. Neither of them could answer. The silence stretched, broken only by Sarah's muffled sobs. I moved to the center of the room, drawing myself up to my full height. I had this whole speech prepared, I said. All the things I wanted to say about trust and betrayal and the vows we made. But looking at you now, I realize there's only one thing that matters. I took a deep breath, looking directly at James. I'm filing for divorce. First thing Monday morning. I don't want explanations or apologies or promises. I just want out. James paled. Clorinda, no, please. We can fix this. What we had was real. Is real. Was, I corrected. Past tense. Whatever we had died, the moment you decided another woman was worth betraying everything we built together. I turned to Sarah. He's all yours now. I hope he's worth what you've lost. Michael stepped forward, his face a mask of contained emotion as he addressed Sarah. 15 years, he said simply. 15 years I gave you, supported your dreams, planned a future with you, and you threw it away for what cheap thrills in hotel rooms, the excitement of sneaking around. He shook his head. I deserved better. We both did. Sarah reached for him, her hand trembling. Michael, please, we can talk about this. Try to work through it. Michael stepped back from her touch. There's nothing to work through. It's over, Sarah. I'll be staying with my brother until you can move your things out of the house. I want you gone within 2 weeks. The finality in his voice seemed to shock Sarah more than any anger would have. You don't mean that, she whispered. You can't just throw away our whole marriage. I didn't, Michael replied evenly. You did. Both of you did. He turned to me. I'm ready to leave when you are. James made one last, desperate attempt, moving to block my path. Clorinda, don't do this. Don't leave with him. Stay. Let me explain everything properly. There's nothing to explain, I said, stepping around him to gather my bag. And there's nothing left to say, except perhaps this: I hope someday you understand what you've lost. I hope someday you realize that no affair, no matter how exciting, is worth destroying the trust of someone who truly loved you. I turned to Michael, who nodded, ready to depart this scene of emotional devastation. As we moved toward the door, Sarah called out one last time. It was James who pursued me, she cried, desperation making her voice shrill. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He kept saying his marriage was already over in all but name. James rounded on her, his face contorted with betrayal. Are you serious right now? You're the one who started flirting with me at that Christmas party. You're the one who suggested meeting for coffee. as they turned on each other, revealing the true nature of their relationship under pressure. Michael and I exchanged a glance of mutual understanding. Without another word, we walked out the door, leaving them to the ruins of the deception they had built together. In the cool night air, with the stars emerging above the trees, I took my first full breath in what felt like days. We had confronted the betrayal head-on. We had maintained our dignity. And now, incredibly, we were taking the first steps toward whatever came next. "Are you okay?" Michael asked as we reached his car. I considered the question seriously. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be. We both will be." As we drove away from the cabin, leaving James and Sarah to face the consequences of their actions alone, I felt a curious lightness beginning to replace the crushing weight of betrayal. Not happiness, not yet, but perhaps the first fragile shoots of liberation, of a future free from lies, where I could begin to rebuild on firmer foundations. The first days after the confrontation passed in a blur of practical matters and emotional aftershocks. Immediately following our departure from the cabin, Michael and I drove back to Seattle, largely in silence, each processing the dramatic end to our marriages. We arrived at my house just before midnight, emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter for having faced the truth head-on. "Thank you," I said as he pulled into my driveway, "for being there with me, for staying calm when I wanted to scream." Michael gave me a tired smile. "Thank you too. I couldn't have done it alone." We exchanged numbers, promising to check in on each other as we navigated the turbulent waters ahead. As I watched his taillights disappear down the street, I felt a curious mixture of grief and liberation. My marriage was over, but so was the uncertainty, the gaslighting, the slow erosion of my self-trust. The next morning, I called a locksmith to change the locks on our Seattle home, then contacted a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague. By Monday afternoon, I had filed the initial paperwork for divorce and moved half of our joint savings into a separate account. Actions my attorney assured me were both legal and prudent, given the circumstances. James called repeatedly throughout those first days, his messages evolving from angry accusations of overreaction to tearful pleas for another chance. I let them all go to voicemail, saving each one as potential evidence should the divorce turn contentious. The woman I had been 6 months earlier might have wavered, might have been tempted by his promises of change, but that woman was gone, replaced by someone who had seen behind the curtain and couldn't unsee the truth. Sarah tried a different approach. She sent a long email, parts apologetic, parts justifying, explaining how she and James had connected during a time when she felt neglected in her marriage. How one thing had led to another, how they had tried to fight their feelings but found themselves drawn together by forces beyond their control. I deleted it without responding, forwarding a copy to Michael, so he would be prepared if she tried similar tactics with him. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Michael texted me, "Sarah moved out yesterday, feeling strange about it. Coffee sometime." We met at a small cafe in Fremont, far from our usual haunts, where we might encounter mutual friends. Michael looked both exhausted and relieved the contradiction I felt in my own heart. "How are you holding up?" he asked, as we settled with our drinks. "Up and down," I admitted. Some moments I feel strong, clear about my decision. Others I find myself looking at old photos, wondering what was real and what wasn't. Michael nodded in understanding. I keep catching myself picking up my phone to text her about something mundane like I've done for 15 years. Then I remember. We talked for hours, sharing the practical steps we'd taken, the reactions from friends and family, the emotional roller coaster of dismantling a life shared with someone who had betrayed us. There was comfort in being with someone who truly understood, who didn't offer platitudes or push for details, who simply nodded and said, "I know." That coffee became a weekly tradition, a checkpoint in our parallel journeys through grief and recovery. We began to share more than just divorce logistics, opening up about our fears, our regrets, our cautious hopes for the future. "I'm selling the cabin," I told him one afternoon about 2 months after the confrontation. "Too many memories now, both good and bad. I need a fresh start." "That makes sense," he said. "Sarah's fighting me on selling our house, though. Claims she can't afford to buy me out, but doesn't want to lose it." "James finally moved his things out last weekend," I shared. "He's living with his brother temporarily." Apparently, Sarah ended things with him shortly after that night at the cabin. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She told her sister they broke up because he wasn't willing to fully commit, even after everything fell apart. We both laughed, a slightly bitter sound at the continued manipulations and half-truths. But the laughter was real too, a sign that the sharpest edges of pain were beginning to dull. As spring turned to summer, my divorce proceedings continued their slow, bureaucratic crawl. I threw myself into work, taking on new clients and projects that had once seemed too challenging or time-consuming. I started hiking again, reclaiming the outdoor activities I had always loved but had somehow become associated with James in my mind. One Saturday in July, I joined a women's hiking group for a day trip to Mount Rainier. As we reached a stunning viewpoint overlooking alpine meadows dotted with wildflowers, I found myself taking deep, cleansing breaths of the mountain air. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a woman beside me, her face glowing with the exertion of the climb. "Breathtaking," I agreed, and suddenly, inexplicably, tears were streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of release, of recognition that beauty still existed, that I could still feel wonder, that my capacity for joy hadn't died with my marriage. The woman, whose name was Denise, didn't ask questions or offer awkward comfort. She simply handed me a tissue and stood beside me in companionable silence until I had composed myself. Later, over trail mix and water, I found myself telling her about the divorce, the betrayal, the slow process of rebuilding. "You're doing the hardest part already," she said when I finished. "You're facing it head on instead of running from it. Trust me, I tried the running approach with my divorce. Didn't work out so well." I left that hike with new perspective and new friends, women who knew nothing about me as half of James and Clorinda, but accepted me simply as myself. It was refreshing, this opportunity to rediscover who I was without the identity of wife, without the shadow of betrayal colouring every interaction. Michael was going through his own process of rediscovery. He joined a rock climbing gym, something Sarah had always refused to try with him. He reconnected with college friends who had drifted to the periphery of his life during his marriage. We continued our weekly coffees, sharing these small victories and setbacks, cheerleading each other through the hard days. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked me one rainy afternoon in September, nearly 6 months after the cabin confrontation. The way we handled it, I mean. Sometimes I wonder if we should have just walked away quietly without the dramatic confrontation. I considered the question seriously. "No," I finally answered. Maybe it would have been more dignified to just send lawyers' letters, but I needed to see his face when he realized he couldn't lie anymore. I needed that closure. I stirred my coffee thoughtfully. "What about you? Do you regret it?" Michael shook his head. "No, that night was painful, but it was clean. No room for misinterpretation or gaslighting. No, maybe I misunderstood, or perhaps there's an explanation." We saw the truth in their faces. He smiled wryly. Plus, the look on their faces when they walked in and saw us waiting was pretty satisfying, I have to admit. I laughed, surprised at how the memory could now bring amusement rather than pain. It really was. Oscar-worthy performances on both sides. As my divorce was finalized in October, I felt another layer of weight lift from my shoulders. The legal entanglements were over. The cabin had sold for a good price, the proceeds split as part of the settlement. James had finally stopped calling, having entered a new relationship with someone I didn't know. Good for both of them, I thought, without bitterness. May they be more honest with each other than he was with me. Sarah and Michael's divorce took longer, complicated by property disputes, and Sarah's continued attempts to reconcile. But by Christmas, it too was complete. We celebrated with dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown, raising glasses to our newfound freedom. To survival, Michael toasted, and to whatever comes next. To truth, I added. However painful, it's better than beautiful lies. As we enjoyed our meal, I studied Michael across the table. The past year had changed him as it had changed me. There was a confidence in his posture that hadn't been there before, a directness in his gaze unobscured by the shadows of doubt that had haunted him during his marriage's slow disintegration. We had become true friends. Through this ordeal, connected by shared trauma, but also by mutual respect, by the recognition of strength in each other. "What are your plans for the new year?" he asked as we lingered over dessert. I smiled, feeling a spark of excitement that had been absent for too long. "I'm taking 3 weeks off to travel to New Zealand. Solo adventure. Hiking, kayaking, staying in tiny cabins in remote locations." "That sounds amazing," he said, his eyes warm with genuine pleasure for me. "Good for you, Clorinda. You deserve it." "What about you?" I asked. "Any big plans?" "Actually, yes," he replied, a hint of nervous energy in his voice. "I've been meaning to ask you something." He took a breath, meeting my eyes directly. "When you get back from New Zealand, would you consider going to dinner with me, not as friends who survived divorce together, but as a date?" The question hung between us, unexpected, yet somehow not surprising. We had carefully maintained boundaries throughout our parallel journeys, offering support without complication. But now, with our pasts officially behind us, with healing well underway, perhaps it was time to consider new possibilities. "I'd like that," I said softly. "Very much." His smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds, warm and full of promise. We didn't rush the moment with elaborate plans or declarations, just the simple acknowledgement that sometimes from the ashes of what we thought we wanted, something unexpected and potentially beautiful can emerge. 18 months after that devastating night at the cabin, I can look back with perspective I couldn't have imagined in those raw, painful days. The Betrayal by James and Sarah taught me harsh but valuable lessons. About trust, yes, but also about my own resilience. About the importance of honesty even when it's difficult. About the freedom that comes with facing truth rather than hiding from it. I learned that what feels like an ending can actually be a beginning, that the collapse of one dream makes room for others to take root and grow, that sometimes the people who hurt us most inadvertently set us free. Michael and I are taking things slowly, building a relationship based on genuine knowing of each other, on transparency and trust, hard-won through shared experience. I don't know where our story will lead, but I'm no longer afraid of the uncertainty. Whatever happens, I know now that I can face it, that I'm stronger than the worst betrayal, that I'm capable of rebuilding, of loving again, of finding joy in unexpected places. If you're facing betrayal or heartbreak right now, know that survival is possible, that the pain won't always be this sharp, that one day you might even be grateful for the harsh lessons that forced you to discover your own strength. Have you ever had to confront a betrayal head on? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments, and if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Your experiences might help someone else find their way through the darkness toward whatever light awaits on the other side. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one.